have everybody out. Looks like everybody's still got their coats on. Try to heat up a little more if you wanted to. Then some will probably be flocking towards the doors for the cold weather. Calling any names on that. But we're going to sing a hymn before we have a Bible class, and Roy will lead us in prayer. We're in the construction business across the way for Family Bible Day Saturday, so I appreciate it. Everybody stay in here unless you want to help in the construction process after service. We'll sing number 456 together. 4, 5, 6. We'll sing number 456, and Brother Roy will lead us in prayer, and then we'll have our Bible classes. No tears in heaven, no sorrows given, all will be glory in that land. There'll be no sadness, all will be gladness, when we shall join that happy band. No tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears up there, no tears in heaven will be known. Glory is waiting up yonder, where we shall spend an endless day. There with our Savior will be forever, where no more sorrow can dismay. No tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears up there, no tears in heaven will be known. Some morning yonder will cease to ponder, for things this life has brought to view. All will be clearer, loved ones be dearer, in heaven where all will be made new. No tears up there, sorrow and pain will all have flown. No tears up there, no tears in heaven will be known.
Father, we're grateful for another day of life. We're grateful for everyone that's here tonight.
Luke chapter number 29 or 23. There's 29 chapters in Luke. We're making some more copies, so if you got a copy, get one in just a minute. Yeah, I just about made a mistake. Hey, I was watching TV a little bit this afternoon, and they were talking about funeral services for President Bush. And the fellow on there is a pretty smart politician, but he said, I think it's in Luke chapter 28, where it says, he who is given much is required, which is the truth, but he didn't know it right. He didn't get the 28 chapters right on that, so we got to be careful about that. While Ronald's making some more copies as far as the lesson is concerned, let's go ahead and look at Luke chapter number 23. We'll read that just so we'll have the grounding and the foundation on which we'll look at the questions afterwards. And we'll get into a little discussion, hopefully, as far as how we can apply the story of Luke chapter 23. I'll start, we'll read after that. After I read a little bit, jump on in. Luke 23 and verse 1 says, And the whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation, and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying in himself, He is a king. And Pilate asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, Thou sayest it. Then said Pilate to the chief priest and to the people, I find no fault in this man. And they were the more fierce, saying, He stirreth up the people, teaching throughout Jewry, beginning from Galilee to this place. And when Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the land were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was at Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod, with his men of war, set him at naught and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves. David, you want to read for us? Starting.
Well, when he brought together the chief priests and rulers of the people, said to them, You brought this man unto me, one that perverted the people, and behold, I have examined him before you, found no fault in this man. He touched those things whereof he accused him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and those that are worthy of death is done to you. I will therefore chastise him and release him, for of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. They cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release him to us, Barabbas, who, for a certain sedition, made in the city, for a murderer was cast in prison. Pilate therefore moved and released Jesus, spake he unto them, but they cried, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. And he said unto them the third time, Why? What evil hath he done? I found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. They were with loud voices, crying, Crucify him. And it was to them, and then the chief priests rebelled. Pilate gave them sentence, that it should be as they required. And you listen to them, that for the sedition of murder was cast in prison, whom they had desired, but they for him he ordered Jesus to their will.
And as they led him away, they laid him hold upon one side of his spear, pulling out his clothing, and ultimately laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. And they followed him a great procession of people, and women, and also the veil and the head. But Jesus turning to them said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming, and which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the womb that never bare, and the calves which never gave milk. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things and they bring tree, what shall be done in the dry? And therefore also 2 other malefactors led with him to be put to death, and they were come to the place which is called Calvary, He stood believing, and the rulers also moved him throughout the home saying, he said to others, let me stake the stone, to be Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming him and offering him prayers, and saying, if thou be the king of the Jews, save thyself. And the superscription also was written over them, and letters in Greek and Latin and Hebrew, this is the king of the Jews. And one of the elders which were made to know him, saying, if thou be Christ, save thyself and us. But the others answered and rebuked him, saying, dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same nation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the gift of the Lord, our deeds, but this man hath done nothing. Speaking of Jesus, before he knew Jesus, Jesus said unto him, surely I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise.
Now behold, there was a man named Joseph, a council member, a good and just man. He had not consented to the cities indeed. He was from Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who saw himself was also waiting for the kingdom of God. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then he took it down, wrapped it in linen, and laid it in the tomb that was hewn out of the rock, where no one had ever lain before. That day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew near. And the women who had come with him from Galilee followed after, and they observed the tomb and how his body was laid. Then he returned and prepared spices and fragrant oils, and they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment.
Very good. You don't have a sheet. Raise your hand, Justin. All right. Account of the crucifixion of Jesus. It's important to know the facts and the details. We got 3 over here. I think there's 2 over there. It's important to know the facts and the details surrounding the crucifixion of Jesus, with the trial of crucifixion, and the people who were involved and that sort of thing. I think it's more important for us tonight, if we can, to try to put ourselves in that particular place at that particular time. Because a lot of times we don't know, we kind of see it from a distance and we're not involved. If we were involved in that crowd and that lynching that went on there and all the things that were surrounding that, how would we react, or how would we see ourselves in a situation like that? So the facts and the details are important, but we have to recognize it in the context of how we apply it to ourselves, as well as knowing that. So number 1 says, what was Jesus accused of before Pilate? Verse number
2. Subverting the nation.
All right, subverting the nation, sedition, speaking out against Caesar. He was basically being accused by the Jews who hated the Romans and hated being under the rule of the Romans, of trying to raise up a rebellion against Rome. If he was really in that situation trying to do that, there would have been a lot of those Jews there that would have been on board with that. But they knew that that would be the one crime that Rome would not tolerate. If they were going to be able to have him to be killed, it would be because he stood up and tried to destroy or overtake the Roman government there. All right, so he was accused of that particular situation because they knew it was a crime that was worthy of death as far as the Romans were concerned. number 2, how did Pilate know Jesus was not a threat to the power of Rome? And I've got John 18:33 through 36 there. John's account gives us part of the discussion between Jesus and Pilate. And so Pilate, in Luke, it doesn't give us a detailed reason for why Pilate knew what he knew, but John does fill in that information for us. Somebody got John 18:33 through 36. Want to read that? Got that wrong?
Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, Thou keep the Jews. Jesus answered him, saying, Thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it to thee? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation, the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from this.
Okay, so Pilate didn't just assume because of the envy. He knew that the Jews were envious of Jesus and his power or influence on the people and what the people were trying to do there. But Pilate interviewed Jesus based upon the charges that were brought or levied against him. And Jesus recommended or told him that he was not guilty of that. But what did he think as far as the kingdom and the power that he was to be given or that he had? Well, it was all, but he said his kingdom was what? All right, not of this world. So Pilate, based upon what he was saying, recognized that this was not a political situation where Jesus was trying to overthrow the Roman government. He knew it from what Jesus told him there, that he was not concerned about the politics of the land at that particular time. All right, number 3. How many times was Jesus pronounced innocent? Verse number 22. 3. All right. We can see here a pattern developing with Pilate. Pilate's trying to get out from under having to condemn an innocent man. He didn't want to do it. Even his wife, I think it's, I'm not mistaken, Mark's account where his wife comes to him and says, don't have anything to do with this innocent man. I've had dreams about this situation right here. And so Pilate is concerned about that. I think even hardened people, this shows that even hardened people have a sense of right and wrong to some degree. And we know when we have done something wrong or mistreated people. Now, that may not be true of all people who are raised. I know in talking with Sonia about some of the students that she has seen in the past or has dealt with in the school system, that it's like you can just see into their eyes that they don't have anything, they're bent on doing whatever they are going to do because they've not had any moral raising or any home life. There are people like that, I'm sure. But for the most part, people have been raised with some sense of morality, some sense of right or wrong, and given a choice a lot of times, unless it's in their own self-interest, they will do the right thing. So Pilate was trying to do the right thing here to some degree. We don't know exactly what the reason was, but he was trying to do it. 3 times he said, find no fault in him. There's no reason to kill this man. But he does recognize in this passage that he is from Galilee, and Herod's over Galilee, or that's his jurisdiction, so he sends them to Herod. What was Herod's interest in Jesus? All right, so he had an interest in Jesus. This is Herod the Great tried to kill Jesus when he was a baby and killed all the children when God warned Joseph to take Jesus to Egypt. And then Herod killed the babies. This is not the same one. This is actually his son. And so the name Jesus and all the things about Jesus, he was fully aware of and wanted to know more about Jesus. But we look at it, he says he wants to see or have a miracle done. He had an interest in Jesus for what reason? Was it spiritual in nature? A lot of people have an interest in Jesus in some form or fashion. It may be for selfish motivation. The Bible talks about people who preach, who are preaching because of their belly or because of the financial gain or whatever it may be. So there are people all over the world, all over the land, who are interested in Jesus for a lot of different reasons. And so we have to be careful that we analyze ourselves and make sure that we're sincere and sincerely motivated in why we're following Jesus, and not just because it's the right or because it's the what you say people do it just because the crowd's doing it. There's a lot of people nowadays that are involved in things that are quote Christian that are just doing it because that's the in thing to do. Number 5. What things did Pilate do to try to release Jesus? Verses 7, 14, 16, 20, and 22. What does it say that Pilate tried to do in verse 7 to try to get out of condemning Jesus? All right, he tried to put it off on somebody else. If Herod could condemn him, then it would take it off of his plate, and he wouldn't have been accountable for that. All right, verse number 14. He appealed to the people. I found no fault in it. What's the reason here? So he tries to appeal to those people and to get a division or a movement among all those who are there to say, right, realistically, he's right. Let's don't do it. But nobody was to be moved. It's kind of the politics of our day and time where, you've got those on the right and those on the left, and there's not anything that's going to happen that's going to move them from the right or the left. And so most of our political situation is trying to get those people to right in the middle to go right or left. But most people are locked into their position and don't want to move. But Pilate was trying to encourage them to do the right thing at this particular time. All right? Verse 16. All right? I'll beat him. That'll straighten him out a little bit, and let's just let that be it. So that was the third thing. 20. And that doesn't really say it, but it's talking about the account of where he was to release one unto the people. 20, what verse is that? Talking about Barabbas. 18. So he tried to make a swap. All right, that was, I can appease some of you by swapping Barabbas for Jesus. And that might satisfy enough to keep you from having to kill him. And then verse 22, look at that one. It says 3 times he appealed. So he continued to appeal over and over and over again. Can you see a pattern here in Pilate as far as trying to do the right thing?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so I think if we start trying to look at ourselves in this particular light here as far as making a stand, are we willing to stand one time and defend what's right? Are we willing to stand twice? Are we willing to stand 3 times? How far do we go before we break? Is kind of the question that we look at here. Pilate had a limit on what he was willing to go. He tried to avoid doing what was put upon him to do. But we have to be sure that we go all the way, are willing to go all the way and standing up for what we know is right. All right, number 6. What were the crimes of Barabbas? Verse number 25.
Sedition.
All right, what did they accuse Jesus of? Sedition. They didn't accuse him of murder, but basically the same things. Was Barabbas guilty? He was guilty. He had devised a plan to overthrow the rulers in the city and was taken. So what Jesus was accused of, Barabbas was actually guilty of to some degree. And so I think that's kind of interesting that the man that was released was guilty of what the man that was killed was innocent of. Number 7, how does Barabbas represent all of us? All right, so we can step back, and if we want to, we're not guilty of murder. At least I don't think any of us are in here guilty and no one in here is trying to overthrow any government, so we're not like Barabbas in that respect. But what we have to do is we have to look at it in Barabbas that he represents all of mankind, and that there's guilt in all of us, and that Jesus, just as Barabbas should have been punished for his guilt and crimes, we should be punished as well. Is that not necessarily talking about the physical aspects of it, but the spiritual?
I'll be the plain 16 Bruce right here. Chastising our these homes like Christ. So we cause it. Each one of us bear responsibility. They have sinned.
Yeah, all of us.
Technically.
Went one step too far there, but that's okay. Number 8. Who was enlisted to carry the cross of Jesus? Simon. Alright, Simon of Cyrenia. He was a man coming in out of the country, it says, and he was called upon that. In one account it says that Jesus was unable to carry the cross, for he dropped and fell with it, and so he was called upon. And that was normal in that particular time. The Roman military, if they had a need, you stood by and they called on you to do it. There was no objecting. You just fell in line and did it. And so this man did not have any options to carry the cross of Jesus. It was forced upon him. When we think about that aspect of it, we talk about ourselves. He was required to carry the cross physically for Jesus. Are we required to carry the cross for Jesus in a spiritual sense?
Yes.
All right. Does that mean that that's just a spiritual connotation that we're talking about here?
Might cost you life.
All right.
Still.
All right. So we look at it from the standpoint of this as being a physical example of a man carrying the cross for Jesus, but we can make spiritual application that we're supposed to carry the cross for Jesus. Jesus himself said, if any man will be my disciple, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So cross bearing is a part of it. But we look at it from the standpoint of it being a spiritual or in spiritual context, but it has physical applications as well. Carrying our cross is spiritually applied by how we do it in our lives. If we have to give up a job, if we have to stand up to somebody, if we have to give up family, whatever it may be, the cross bearing is something that is done physically with the spiritual connotations underneath it or lying beneath it. Number 9. What words describe why Pilate crucified Jesus? Verses 23 through 25. It says, and they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them of the chief priests prevailed, and Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And he's released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired, but he delivered Jesus to their will. Looking for some words here to describe why Pilate crucified Jesus. Alright, satisfy the people. It talks about the will, talks about, the chief priest prevailed. The pressure was on him from all corners of this group. And so he crucified them, not because he wanted to, or not using his best judgment, but because he's basically submitted to the pressure that he was being given by all those people there. That doesn't happen today, so we don't really have to worry about being pressured into doing something wrong in our lives. Roy's paying attention. All right. We understand that peer pressure or political correctness or whatever it may be, actually in our lifetime, just in the last 10 years, especially this political correctness stuff has become just unbelievable as far as people stopping to do things. I know Christmas is nothing in the sense of religious or anything like that, but there are so many things being pushed down or done away with. I've heard just the other day that the pressure to stop singing about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer because it's a song about bullying. We can't say without bullying him. They were bullying him because he had a red nose, and so when the big guy, Santa Claus, wanted to take him on, and they liked him. But they didn't like him because he had a red nose. They just wanted to get close to him because Santa Claus liked him. You know, they still didn't like him. But we understand the idea of political correctness and the pressure is there. And you can see it coming down the pipe as far as Christianity is concerned, with all the things that are being done in our government as far as homosexuality and that sort of thing. The pressure to not say anything against it is there. Before long, it'll be on the church if you preach against it.
One church.
Huh?
Depending on one church.
One church. In religious groups, there's always been that pressure, yeah. Yeah, but you can see the society and the way that it's going in the sense of morality. To preach against morality is going to bring upon us the pressure from them to shut up or face the consequences. You know, and I think that probably the way that they're going to do it first is they'll take away the financial tax benefits of the church not having to pay taxes. You preach about that, we'll take that away from you. You'll have to start paying taxes on your property and all this sort of stuff. So they've got means and ways to put pressure on us so that we, some of us, I don't know who, would stop preaching about things that are immoral and send people to hell. He succumbed to it, and if we're not careful, if we're not strong in our faith, we can just as easily fall to it as well. Number 10. Why did Jesus tell the women calling him not to weep? I got a verse down there, 28 through 30. Arnold, you want to read that again for us?
Jesus turned to them and said, daughters of Robertson, not for me, but weep for yourselves, for your children. For the days are coming, in which they shall say, blessed are the barren, and the woman which never tired, will never gain succor.
Verse 30.
Then they shall begin to say, not all of us, but to the hills over us.
All right, Jesus is going down the road, Simon's behind him carrying the cross, and all these women that had been following Jesus, following him into Jerusalem, were part of his contingent there in Jerusalem, saw what was going on, and now they're following after he's been arrested and tried, and now they're following to Calvary, and they're weeping and crying over the fact that Jesus is going to get ready to be crucified. Jesus turns to them and says, don't cry for me, cry for yourselves. Why?
Because the worst things shall be done to them.
Okay.
This is done in ministry, what shall be done to them?
All right, so Jesus recognizes that he's been beaten, scourged, made fun of, all this stuff, and now he's getting ready to go through the anguish and the pain of the cross, and he's saying that it's going to be worse for you. How does that measure up as far as what Jesus went through and the pain and anguish that he went through as being worse? I think that he's looking at it from the standpoint of the nation or the city of Jerusalem, or all of it as a whole, as far as the destruction of that.
I think it's something about the fact Jesus had honor, Holy Spirit smote him, and those people had nothing.
Yep. All right, good point. But Jesus recognized that, and so talking about those that didn't have children would be a benefit, but they would not have seen their children slaughtered in what was getting ready to take place in Jerusalem. All right, and then Roy made an allusion to what Jesus said: the things that are done in a green tree. If they do the things that are done in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? And I think I've got the next question there. What was Jesus talking about in verse 31, and how does it apply to us? So what's he talking about? Done in a green tree, and it's going to be worse in the dry. Roy alluded to it some there, the fact that Christ had the Father and the Spirit to help him along the way. Jesus was what? Innocent. Look how harshly they did him. The Jews were guilty of and deserved everything that they got. So it was going to be worse for them in that sense, how much harsher it was going to be that the Romans would treat them at the destruction of Jerusalem. And I think that you probably can look at it long term as far as spiritually speaking. Jesus was innocent, not in eternal consequences of those who are not. It's going to be a lot worse. All right. Number 12. Who did Jesus ask God to forgive because of their ignorance? Verse number 34. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I think it was the Roman soldiers who he was asking to forgive. Is that all?
Even the Jews should have, they were still ignorant. God gave them all of them ways to be forgiven. God in Christ and to testify of salvation.
I think this probably takes into account everybody here. The Romans didn't realize, because they didn't have the Old Testament prophecies of the Messiah, that they were just following orders in respect of what they were doing. They were ignorant in that. Jesus requested forgiveness for them in that respect. The Jews were guilty they were guilty of knowing that Jesus Christ was not innocent. In that respect, not forgiving them for that. But they were ignorant of what they were bringing upon themselves by the rejection of Jesus Christ. And so he was asking that. Number 13 says, was the prayer of Jesus answered? Was the prayer of Jesus answered? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
It was Jesus knew about his plan, but they had the opportunity.
Okay, let me ask you this. Acts chapter 2. All these people are there who are part of this situation right now. Peter point blank says he had crucified, but we can hand you crucified him. They were given opportunity right there for what? Forgiveness. So God answered the prayer by giving them opportunity to do what? Obey the gospel. It was not a blanket petition. It was answered on that spot by God. Huh? Yeah, those people on the day of Pentecost, when they were preached the gospel sermon and responded to it, they may have been in that crowd, and some of them were in that crowd yelling, crucified. They were a part of that. Crucified, crucified. Jesus is on that cross and he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That forgiveness did not take place while Jesus prayed that on the cross. Does Jesus answer all our prayers immediately? We understand that. He prayed for their forgiveness and they were given opportunity. Huh? Right.
They don't make the gospel feel like everybody else.
Right. And that's my point is Jesus prayed for it, and we think, well, those people who crucified him, he's not going to forgive them. But there were some of those people there who were forgiven because they obeyed the gospel. Right. And they had to meet the conditions. And that's true of anybody that's going to be forgiven. They have to meet the conditions. And so Jesus' prayer was answered in the sense that God, this whole thing was done to provide the plan of salvation, to apply the blood of Jesus Christ. And so it was a part of God's plan for them to be forgiven if they would meet the conditions of salvation. Hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, being baptized would be that. If they weren't in this particular situation, as the gospel preached there to those people. Still applies to those who are outside the Lord's church today. All right. Any other comments about that? Yes, sir.
Why would God not
And no one to bring it. Had no sense of the funeral.
Well, he would answer in the sense that they had the perfect relationship, but in the sense of us looking at it from the standpoint of human beings, how do you pray for somebody to be forgiven that was in the process of killing? You know, it's confusion on how that works. He did.
Just like his prayer in the garden. Let this cup pass from him.
Still went to the cross.
Yeah.
He answered his prayer.
And what are the answers to prayer? Yes, no, and not maybe later. Later.
He let the cup pass from him when he gave him strength to see.
Yeah. And you talk about within God's will, it was within God's will that those who would be obedient to the gospel call to be saved.
Maybe my question is, did Jesus know how to pray according to God's will?
Yeah.
He had said in his life, is there any reason that God would not answer his prayer?
Okay. I think what you're saying here is the wording on my question is not right. And the better way to ask that question. It was within God's will, and Jesus answered, or God answered Jesus' prayer. I guess I should have been, how was the prayer of Jesus answered? Okay.
One man is right.
All right.
If God would not answer a prayer from Jesus, where does that leave us?
Without hope. You're right. All right. Anybody else? Appreciate it. Number 14. What was written and placed on Jesus' cross?
It says, King of Kings.
All right. All right. Pilate did this. Offended the Jews on this. What we need to do is, we know what it was put up there. We know what the words say. We know what language it was in. We know all the facts about this. But what is the implication for us? It was the king of the Jews. He's the king of everybody. This was something that cannot be argued, and so it's a matter of power and submitting to the power of Jesus. Those Jews, even after he was strung up on the cross, was not willing to acknowledge or did not want anything to be said about that. Sometimes we don't fight it in the same way that the Jews did, in saying, don't call him the king of the Jews, but say that he was. But we do that in our lives by not submitting to him in our lives. Number 15. What characteristics can be seen in the thief? Jesus said, today thou shalt be with me in paradise, 40 through 42. It says, but the other answering rebuked him, saying, do not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the reward of our deeds, but this man hath done nothing amiss. And he said unto the Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. What qualities or characteristics are found in this particular thief or malefactor?
He was a sinner and he confessed it. He knew it.
All right. All right. He acknowledged his sinfulness. All right. Did you see anything else?
He asked for mercy.
All right. He confessed Jesus as the Christ or the King. So we see some qualities or characteristics of this, and he at one time was railing on Jesus, so he had a change of heart. What about that last verse, though, that we read there? What did he say? Remember me? Did he have some selfish motivations in there as well? Okay. Yeah. And so, we have to look at it from that standpoint. It's not wrong to appeal to God for what we need or for our benefit. We need to submit ourselves to the best we can to His glory and honor in a position of humility. But we need to look out, or need to be looking out for ourselves in that respect. So, what is the significance of the veil of the temple being rent? Verse 44.
Separation between God and the
Most holy place done away with.
All right.
Churches, people
so we know in the Old Testament that in the establishment of the temple, the tabernacle, that they had the holy and the most holy. Who could go into the most holy place? Only the high priest. Once a year. Mankind as a whole was separated, and he had to go in and make a sacrifice for himself and then make a sacrifice for the people in order to be able to go in there. That separated who was in the most holy place of the Holy of Holies. God. That symbolized the presence of God, and no one was allowed in there. The veil of the temple is what separated these two places, and it was rent asunder, meaning that there was access now to the Holy of Holies, and it was done at the time of Jesus' cross on the cross, when he was sacrificing his blood and making access to all of mankind. So there was no longer a barrier there between man and God. There is still a barrier between man and God. What is it? Sin. Okay. So the veil is gone, or the access to God is gone, but we still have to meet the conditions to access God. And that is the blood of Jesus Christ and making that application, whether it be in baptism or in repentance and prayer as a Christian. Number 17, what is meant by the idea they smote their breasts? Number 48, verse number 48. 48 says, and all the people that came together to that sight, beholding the things which were done, smote their breasts and returned. All right, they smote their breasts to symbolize if something bad really happens and we put our hands, just grab our head or something and know the tragedy of the situation, that's kind of what it was. They recognized this is not talking about everybody. This is not talking about the whole crowd as far as what was being done there. The people who recognized Jesus met all the prophecies and all the things that, as far as the Messiah, the Christ, the one who was going to save Israel, were the ones that were distraught. It wasn't everybody, just those who understood. And so when we look at what happened to Jesus, we don't have to be distraught because we can see the picture of what it was and what it presented and made because Jesus did this. Number 18, how can we apply what Joseph of Arimathea did? What did he do? He had an opportunity to take care of the body of Jesus. All right? The question, though, is how can we apply that? You left out one important phrase that I'm looking for here. Anybody fill in the blank he left out? What did Jesus of Arimathea do? He took the body of Jesus. We talk about what he did. Was the physical body of Jesus. How do we apply that to ourselves today? I'm not going to answer this one for you. You've got to figure this one out in a second. Well, that's reverence, but I'm still looking for another word here. Come on, help me here, help me. He took the body of Jesus and did what he could with it. How do we apply that today? Come on, help me here. What is his body? Church, that's what I'm looking for. When we talk about taking care of the body of Jesus, he did what he could for the physical body of Jesus. We need to do what we can for the church, the body of Jesus today. And that's where our being like Joseph of Arimathea is applicable to us. Number 19, the last one. We're passing out some special sheets here. Does what the women did teach us anything? 55 and 56. What did the women do? All right. I should have known you talk about resting. That's not my point at all. Anything they'll find it. Okay, let's move on. Let's see what else they did besides resting. Huh? Well, all right. Joseph of Arimathea took the body, he wrapped it up, put it in his own sepulcher there, and they what did they do? They saw where he took the body. They saw where it was put. And then they made the preparation for the body after the Sabbath day was over. Most of the time, when people are dead and gone, or when something is over, people just put it behind them and move on. You know, these people saw the death of Jesus, and they were still applying themselves to Christ after the death. They were still concerned about Jesus and still doing what they could for the body of Jesus. And I think that's something that we need to look at in the sense of, you know, when things are over and done, we need to be moving forward or trying to apply ourselves to what we can do further than that to help out Jesus Christ. There's not an end game. With Jesus' death, it was not the end. There were people who left and said, well, this is the end of the battle. He's dead. There's not going to be any restoration of the kingdom here. But they understood more than that, and they worked towards that end. Any comments or questions? I know that I thoroughly covered all that. There shouldn't be any questions or comments at this point. I'm teasing. I hope that some of it will intrigue you to think and study a little bit more about the death and crucifixion of Jesus. I guess everybody's here. Appreciate that. If you want to turn to Psalms 2. Number 520 will be our hymn of invitation. 500. I want to thank you again for being here. I hope that it's been beneficial to you, that you've learned a little bit, that you're encouraged by your efforts to be here. I hope you'll look around the room and see if there are those who are not here and check on them and make sure that there's not some needs that need to be met as far as that goes. We want to think about our soul's condition before we leave this place tonight. The Lord's invitation is always available. We want to take special note at this time so that we can encourage each other to make our lives right in case something should happen and the Lord should return. Psalms chapter 2. It's just 12 verses. I'm going to read it and then I'm going to focus on one particular verse in here. So if you'd like to follow, you can. It says, why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree of the Lord hath said unto me, thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are they, all they that put their trust in him. I want to think for just a minute about verse number 4. It says, he that sitteth in heaven shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. This particular passage is talking about Jesus Christ and him being established on his throne. It's a prophecy of Jesus Christ. It's talking about the rulers or nations or people in general rejecting Jesus Christ. In verse 4 it says there, he that sitteth in heaven shall laugh. It's talking about God sitting in heaven, God being in heaven in control of all things. You know, I've got some grandchildren, and I've even had some people who are a little older think that they could whoop me. And they come up and try to take me down and fight me, and I just kind of laugh at them. know what I'm saying? I know most of you have had kids or grandkids that had that situation where they get this little attitude that they think they can take you down. That's kind of what this passage is alluding to here. God is not laughing about the fact that there are going to be people destroyed and sent to hell. He's not laughing about that. But what he's looking at is that these people who think that they've got this power and ability and just pushing Jesus Christ aside and God aside, God said, he's just laughing in the sense of, he knows the impossibility of having someone to stand up or be able to rebel against him. And so that's what I want us to think about tonight. In our lives, God is not laughing at us in the sense of if we're wrong. God has done everything within His power to make it possible for us to be saved. He wants all to be saved. 2 in verse 4, 2 Peter 3. God has done everything within His power to save us, but we have to have a heart of submission in order to be saved. And so God knows the outcome of trying to withstand Him. Holding on to whatever we have in our lives that's sin. And God knows the outcome of it. We can't overcome God. But God sent Jesus Christ into the world to save us from our sins, if we will, but obey what He says for us to do. Let's not fight against God. In this particular passage is talking about the rulers. But ultimately, it comes down to every mankind. We have to make a decision. Are we going to submit ourselves to Jesus Christ and make Him Lord of our lives? Or are we going to resist Him with the result being that of the devil's head? And so the options are ours. We can't resist with any success. And so what I want us to do is to think seriously about our situation. If we're in a situation where we have sin in our lives, whether it be as a person who's not a member of the church, that we would think seriously about making our lives right with God and with Jesus by being obedient to the plan of salvation, hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, and being baptized. But also we need to think about it in the light of us being Christians as well. We can, at times, through our pride and arrogance and success in life, think that we got things in control. But if we've got sin in our lives, we don't have things in control, and we need to make things right with Him so that we can be successful in the eyes of God. And that means that with sin in our lives, we confess that sin as publicly as it is, confess it, repent of it, and then pray God and He'll forgive us. That's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about the invitation. We can't resist God. Let us submit ourselves to Him and do what He requires of us to do so that we can have the hope of eternal life. If you need to make your life right tonight, I want to encourage you to do that. I want to give it a stand and all this sing.
In the sweet voice of Jesus say, come unto me, I am the way. Hearken the longing call of faith. Come forth, be not to song. Only a step, only a step. Come forth, be glad for you and I. Jesus and love, in sacred yet. Jesus the truth in mine. Open for you the pearly gate. Love was for you. Now watch and wait. Terrible love to cry today. Jesus our God. tonight. Hope to see you Sunday. Or actually, hope you can make it with us Saturday for our family Bible day starting at 8:30, going till about 1. We'll start activity about 1. There'll be breakfast at 8:30, and then we have great things planned for the study of John the Baptist, so we hope all can be involved. I know that there's going to be preparation going on this week, so if you can pitch in there, that'd also be very appreciated. I want to remind everyone of those that are on our prayer list. I believe most everyone's aware of the passing of Brother Jim Slate. We'll remember that family in our prayers. Visitation was today. I believe the funeral's tomorrow at 1. Graveyard, awesome. Then remember those that are on our prayer list that are suffering from several things that we know about. Pray God fill them. Are there any additions or updates that we need to make on anyone or anything at this time? Hebrews 3:13 is our internalization verse for the week. Do we have anyone for closing prayer? All right, if you would bow in, please. Our Father, I want to thank you for this opportunity that we have to come together to study your word. Father, we pray as we close this evening that we have served you in some way that has been able to promote your kingdom and make us a stronger Christian, and that we can do better tomorrow than we did today. Father, we pray that you will be with those of our congregation and those that we know and love that are sick and suffering. We pray that you will help them, give them strength, and help us to encourage them and do what we can to help them through their difficult times. We pray for those that have lost loved ones. We pray especially for the Slate family. Comfort them. We pray for this congregation. We hope that we can grow together in love for the truth, love for each other, and that we can build up your kingdom and one day have a home in heaven with thee. Forgive us our sins. Do us to meet again. In Christ's name.
Thank you, sweetie. That's good.
Mom, ready? Mom, ready?
Y'all bring it on.
Yeah.